All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Superintendent's Webcast. We'll be right with you. I'll go ahead and post the agenda and we can at least get that uploaded for everyone to see. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, Tony.
Perfect. All right, so while the commissioner gets back on, I will just go ahead and start the agenda for you. And we'll start with a welcome with Dr. Glass. I will go through and share some important communications updates and announcements. Dr. Darnell is going to go through and do a brief overview of our 2022 Impact Kentucky results. Mickey Ray will be on to go over some from the Office of Teaching and Learning, some March 2022 leadership meeting updates. Our legislative, we'll have some legislative updates from Brian Perry, our Director of Government Relations. We will have an update from Dr. White on up-to-date, what that means with COVID-19 vaccinations. We will have some updates on our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts here at the Department of Education. And then we will go over to the question and answer session with the leadership team. So all of our superintendents, you have a link to the Google form in your calendar invite. So if you have any questions about any of these items during the webcast, as always, you can put that into the Google form that you have, and we will do our best to answer your questions during the webcast. And I don't see the commissioner on yet. So I will go ahead and just jump right into the communications updates, and then we can go back to him after I am done. I want to start by going to our Teacher of the Year nominations. So this year we had a goal of trying to get nominations from every single one of our districts in the state. And up here on the map, you will see this is a map that we posted yesterday on social media. And the counties of the districts in the white were ones that did not yet have a nomination for Teacher of the Year. I'm happy to report that since yesterday, we have had about 600 additional nominations come in, and that most of these districts now have at least one nomination. So we will update this map. Really excited that we have, I believe, the last time I looked, about 1,400 nominations for 2023 Kentucky Teacher of the Year. So I'm really excited that many of you all in your districts and in our communities are nominating teachers for these great awards that are offered and sponsored by Valvoline every year. And so thank you for all of your nominations, and those close next week. And we will update the map and put those on social media and let you know if you do not have a teacher that has been nominated in your county. I will make sure to let you all know. Next slide. I also wanted to call attention to the fact that we do have our teacher and our student member on the Kentucky Board of Education will be rotating off of the board in about a month or about 6 weeks or so. And so we have both applications are posted on our website, and they are real specific to congressional districts. And I'm going to go to the next slide to basically show you which districts that they must come from. So the student must reside in the 4th Congressional District. And most importantly, they must currently right now be a sophomore in the 4th Congressional District. That is right here, the counties that are listed on this slide. What's really important is that we right now have no applications for the student member on the Kentucky Board of Education. So if you are in one of these districts and you can share that news with the sophomores that will be a junior this fall, that would be awesome. And we have links to the application for the sophomore, for the student member on our website. And any questions you can direct to me or Dr. Brewer with our Kentucky Board of Education, and we can answer any questions there. For the teacher position, it is the 6th Congressional District, and those are the counties that they have to reside in order to represent the teachers on the Kentucky Board of Education. So these are one-year positions for each one, and they rotate each year, just to kind of give you a synopsis of both of those positions. And again, once again, both of those applications are on the Kentucky Department of Education website, and just to kind of give you an idea of which counties both of those positions need to come from. The David Karam Award is also up for nominations. This is an award that has been named after a former chairman, David Karam, and it's given each year to state policymakers, education leaders, or citizens who have made notable state-level contributions to the improvement of Kentucky's education system, public education system. Nominations are open through March 18th. So we have a little bit of time, just over a month, for those, so please get some nominations in for that as well. I wanted to give a shout out to many of our superintendents. This in particular is Bracken County Superintendent Jeff Ollick. We recently posted a story on Kentucky Teacher about superintendents, and about particularly our superintendents that are kind of going the extra mile and are becoming bus drivers. They're doing custodial work and things like that to keep our schools running with the shortages that we are seeing right now. So I just wanted to just take an opportunity to just give a shout out to you all, our superintendents and many other staff members in our K-12 schools that are just going above and beyond, doing this all hands on deck approach to keep our schools running during this time. I know that it's been very difficult. And thank you to Superintendent Ollick for talking with us for our story, and for us for sharing your story, and for letting us share your story with those across the country. It's been picked up and it's been very well received. So thank you for that. And then also I wanted to share with you that we just recently honored our recent class of nationally board certified teachers. We had 85 that were recently certified. We did the ceremony last week, and that video is available on our website. You can check it out there. They joined more than 4,100 teachers across the state who have gone through this process. It's a very rigorous process, as many of you know. It requires nearly 400 hours of time and effort to achieve. And then we also have a KHSAA Board of Control at-large position that is open, and we are accepting applicants for this position through the end of March. The main point to mention here is that it is an at-large position. It will become a vacant on June 30th. And so if you have interest in this position, you can go ahead onto the website. The link is also on this slide, and you can fill out this application and let us know if you are interested in that as well. Before I switch over to Dr. Darnell, Dr. Glass, I saw that he had come on. Did you want to come in and kind of do a formal welcome after?
Thanks for picking up the ball, Tony, and good afternoon, everyone. I know that we've got a really busy agenda, so I won't keep you from it. My apologies for a little technical problem right at the outset. It looks like Tony picked up things nicely. Let's go ahead and transition over to Dr. Darnell to talk about the Impact Kentucky results.
Thanks so much, and everyone, thank you for your time. I know it's extremely valuable, so I will be quick in doing this. I know it's always kind of death by PowerPoint, so we will just take a 30,000-foot view of the results, and know at the local level, certainly this has been of great interest. And also just, reality of the times that we're in. So I just wanted to continue to emphasize that, it is just a snapshot in time and at the local level with all the nuances that come with it. So just looking at the Kentucky Working Conditions Survey at the state level, we did have, and you can find all this, of course, on the dashboard provided by Panorama, but there were a total of 38,179 responses. There were approximately 42,000 responses in 2020. So considering the environment that we're in, I think the response rate is impressive. Again, just given the hurdles that we've had to overcome as far as being in person at times. 75% were female, 20% were male, and 3% preferred not to answer. So certainly we see the reflection of sort of the balance leaning, as not surprising, in the female representation. Also not overly surprising, 90% white, 2% African American, 1% Hispanic or Latino, 1% two or more races, and then we had 2% as other, and then 3% as no data. So that is just the overall breakdown. It also gave us a little bit of perspective as far as how these teachers were prepared. Again, leaning heavily 80% traditional, 18% alternative, and then 2% we had no data or they did not answer. It's interesting to note that while the traditional percentage is going down, the alternative is going up. Certainly the numbers are significantly different, so it is more of a small representation percentage-wise, but certainly the alternative routes are increasing in terms of overall percentage. Then the primary role in years taught, 86% teacher responses, so the bulk, of course, coming from certified teachers, which is the primary purpose for this survey, 2% principal and assistant principal, and then 9% other. And then in terms of the years, we had 18% respondents at 0 to 4 years, 23% at 5 to 10 years, 34%, the largest majority in 11 to 20 years, so that mid-career, and then 23% at greater than 20 years, and of course 2% no data. Then looking at years at the current district, kind of an important metric, 28% being 0 to 4 years, 26% 5 to 10, 28% at 11 to 20, and 15% at greater than 20 years. But just interesting to note that the 28 percentage being the mid-career and the entry into profession, making up the bulk of the respondents amongst particularly the teachers. Then years at current school. A little bit of an interesting note statewide, 40% of the respondents checked the 0 to 4 years, 28% at 5 to 10, 22% at 11 to 20, and then 8% at over 20. So years at current school certainly reflect the early entry to career as the predominant respondent. And then the grade span, of course, we had 34% primary, 14% intermediate, 22% middle school, and 27% high school. So our primary making up the largest majority of individuals responding. Next slide. So in looking at the 2020 results to the current results, the greatest increase came in a 3% increase in resources. Certainly, with the influx of the ESSER funds, federal funds, there's certainly been a great deal of spending that has come with this. Surprisingly, the resources has been a low percentage of favorable responses, which is just a little bit interesting, but certainly is on the rise, and that is not surprising given the influx of federal dollars. Then as far as no change, there was 0% change in staff relationships with school leaders. It remained even. And then the largest decrease from 2020 was 7% decrease in those that found educating all students as favorable. So kind of an overview of our increases, our status quo, and then our largest decrease as a state. Next slide. The new data, of course, that was not available from the prior administration of this survey is the emotional well-being and belonging, certainly of great concern for every single educator and all of us. And only 48% responded favorable in emotional well-being and belonging. And looking at the breakdown of the categories, 47% of teachers responded favorable in emotional well-being and belonging, 68% principals and 64% assistant principals, and then 55% other. So it just kind of gives you a dynamic as far as the positions responding to this particular addition to the survey. However, on a bright note, 70% of the respondents across the state were favorable for the sense of belonging at their current school. So extremely important to highlight. And 60% were favorable with their effectiveness, which given, again, the constraints and just the transitions, I think reflects a point of praise just in terms of being flexible. And then only 26% were favorable in terms of concern with their colleagues, of course, meaning there is great concern for their colleagues. And then 36% favorable for concern with their own well-being. So it's not surprising that educators have high level of concern for their peers, which of course we know is predominant in our schools. But then also, you know, they have a high concern for themselves as well. Next slide. So the panorama has really worked to provide supports to each school district and the resources that are available per their website through the contracted administration of this survey. But we have, and I'm not going to go through, but you will see that there are several professional learning opportunities being provided for schools, districts in order to maximize the use of this survey. These are all available to each and every one of you all as you see fit, and of course broken down, of course, by school leader, school base versus district leaders. So the most important thing is I just continue to praise each and every one of you. The difficulty of this, remember going into teaching, they try to tell you not to take it personal. But everything is personal and we take these things to heart. And so, you know, we have to be supportive of one another and also just do our best to lift one another up and not get more hardened than we already are per the storylines that we continue to see day in and day out. But just know that your efforts are greatly appreciated. And the things that you're doing in your communities and schools are definitely noticed. So thank you, Tony, and I appreciate the opportunity to just share some of these results.
Thanks, Byron. And of course, we released these to you and have also released them to the media. And then following up on that, there were op-eds that went out in the Courier-Journal and the Herald Leader and in Kentucky Teacher last week around this concept of seeing teachers thrive and how this data really enforces that our teachers are and all of our professionals working in schools are in distress right now, and we need some help. So there were some policy positions taken in that op-ed that you might consider advocating for and supporting. And building on that, we also had an op-ed that came out today in Kentucky Teacher from our Willie Taylor Carver Jr., our Kentucky Teacher of the Year, also reinforced a similar point today. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Now we'll transition. We have our Chief Academic Officer, Mickey Ray, to come on and talk about the leadership meeting coming up. And we've got model curriculum framework, multi-tiered system of supports, new standards, all kinds of stuff to talk about. Mickey, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm going to be very quick. I just want to bring this opportunity to your attention. So when the legislature enacted the statutory requirements around the standards review process and standards implementation, the Office of Teaching and Learning began a series of March leadership meetings beginning that year. And so this year will be no different. And so I wanted to talk to you just about the purpose of this particular meeting. And you'll see here, as Dr. Glass mentioned, we're going to be providing updates on the model curriculum framework. So we have received feedback from different stakeholder groups on specifically section 1 that deals with the local curriculum development process. So we want to present those changes to you, as well as give you some information on a reading and writing instructional resources consumer guide that will be tested in our pilot program beginning next month, but will be released statewide in July of 2022. And the purpose of that consumer guide will be to provide school and district level support around the selection and evaluation of high quality instructional resources, specifically for reading and writing. So that will be the first iteration of this consumer guide. We also have a brand new section. This year we have focused on evidence-based instructional practices. So we've highlighted 6 particular practices. And so we want to be able to give you an overview of that section. Jan Sellers, our Office of Teaching and Learning MTSS coordinator, will be at that meeting as well. And she's going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the newly released implementation guide around Kentucky's framework for MTSS. And then lastly, we of course have been receiving many questions around the standards review process timeline. And so while we can't share any new standards documents with you, we at least want you to have information on where we are in the process as you're thinking about informing your local level work for the Kentucky Academic Standards for Science, and then eventually the CAS for Visual and Performing Arts as well. So that's the purpose of the meeting. The next slide, I want to talk just a little bit about the logistics of that. So if we can go to the next one. Thank you so much. So these will be virtual meetings this year, and they are hosted in partnership with our 8 regional cooperatives. And so we feel as if that has been a very successful pattern in the past, and many of you have been in attendance previously, and we've listened to feedback and felt that it was easier for everyone to attend that as a virtual meeting. So our intended audience, looking at you, superintendents, but also chief academic officers, other district level leaders, the curriculum specialists, MTSS coordinators, and then also key school level administrators that you would like to loop into the meeting as well. We do have to limit the sessions because they are virtual meetings to the first 100 attendees per session. And so on the next slide, I wanted you to have the registration links. So this information has gone out in the Commissioner's Monday message. It's gone out in our standards newsletter, and we're going to cycle that information out at least one more time before the registration links would close. But in this PowerPoint that Tony will share with you, these are live links as well. And so you can see there, there's a meeting date for each educational cooperative. And we would really love for you to choose the one that is linked to your regional cooperative so that you'll be working with others in your region, kind of building relationship around that as well. But if that date doesn't work for you, then of course you could look to some of the other times as well. But that's all I have today. Thank you so much for this time. And if you have any questions, you can follow up in the Google form or send me an email. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Mickey. And as if you didn't know, we have a legislative session going on, and we have our new Director of Governmental Relations, Brian Perry, on with us. Welcome, Brian, to your first Superintendent Webcast to update us on things that are happening in the legislative session that we're keeping track of, and some things from the last legislative session that we're keeping track of. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So, as Dr. Glass just mentioned, we still have a piece of legislation from last session that we are doing some work on. So as you all are all aware, House Bill 563 passed last year and goes into effect this fall. We know there are questions and concerns surrounding the implementation of this bill. So we have provided some recommended language that you see there on the screen to leaders in both chambers. We are essentially shopping these changes around at the moment. So we have some more meetings set up for later this week. I don't know where this is going to go yet, but we wanted to let you all know that we are working. We've heard you, and we are working on getting this language out there. So we'll see if they move forward with it. If not, this is obviously something that they can revisit in the 2023 session. So, Dr. Glass, I didn't know if you had anything to add to this discussion.
Sure. The recommendations that we provided on what we would call cleanup on 563 relate to the public school choice components of it. We looked at the language that's in that. There are some foreseeable problems that we think will arise as this gets implemented. And as a reminder, it gets implemented starting in this summer. So you have to have policies in place. One of the concerns is how is capacity determined? That's not clear in the bill. We've put forward language that indicates that the local district can decide what that capacity determination looks like, and that you have to put that in place in policy. We're also concerned from an equity standpoint that districts will sort of shop around and decide who they'll let in and who they won't. And if we care about equity and we're going to have a system of inter-district school choice, in Kentucky, then it needs to be open to all students. So putting in place some provisions that prevent cherry picking and some provisions that protect districts from students sort of bouncing around to multiple districts in the year, and notice to other districts so that if you have a drop or a change, significant drop or change in enrollment, you have some notice of that. So that's, I think, a high-level summary of the changes that we've recommended. We also recognize that there's probably no consensus on this. A lot of superintendents are looking at this from the standpoint of, one, I'm really not affected by it because interdistrict school choice doesn't really matter that much in my community, or two, you're looking at it as a district that perceives yourself to be a winner when it comes to this, or a loser when it comes to this. And based on one of those three positions, you take different positions about what you'd like to see this bill do. The place that the department and I have been coming from on this is just trying to clean it up so that it's functional and it works. Without some changes legislatively, we think that a lot of the questions around the issues that I've just raised are going to end up getting solved in court. We're going to have courts coming in and trying to make an inference on what the legislature meant by something like capacity. We don't think that's the best outcome for that, and so we're trying to get in front of it. It's not clear that the department has regulatory authority over this bill. The legislature didn't give us that directly, and as efforts have been made to try and bring together groups to recommend some changes on it, there wasn't a great deal of consensus among district leaders and associations around what this should look like. So the department is coming forward trying to be kind of a reasonable middle ground, or the referee in this, and saying, let's establish some clarity around some of these provisions so that this has a chance of being successful. So that's where we're coming from on it. We hope that our legislators pick up some parts of this and provide the clarity that you need as you have to develop policies on this for this summer. I'll turn things back to you, Brian, to shift to the current legislative session.
And just so we're clear, what we're suggesting would require a new bill be filed, probably in the House. So that would require it to get out of both chambers and then go to the governor for action. So just want to make sure we're clear on that. Okay, next slide, please. So for this session, as you all are all aware, this is a budget year. So every 2 years they pass a biennial budget, except for the last 2 years when they've passed one-year budgets because of the COVID pandemic. So this is actually our third budget session in a row, which is highly unusual and may never have happened before. So it's been a strange session in general, because normally the budget process starts with the governor's introduction of their budget proposal, which then gets filed in the House. The House passes their version, goes to the Senate, they pass their version, and they go into free conference committee to hammer out the final budget. This year, the House introduced their budget first. They've already passed it out. They passed it out extremely quickly, so it's been sitting over in the Senate for a while. I suspect that the Senate will continue to sit on that for probably another month or so before they really start to move on it. The governor did go ahead and do his budget proposal or budget recommendations. That became House Bill 285. That will not move forward. House Bill 1 got sent over, like I said, in late January, so it'll sit there for another month or so before they really start to move it. This is a 60-day session. They are aiming for the last day to be April 14th, I believe, because the 15th is Good Friday, although technically they can amend their calendar to stay till April 15th, assuming that it's the 60th working day. So once they get out of free conference, so once the Senate does pass their version of the budget, they'll go into what's called free conference committee to hammer out the final budget. They get sent to the governor for action. While the governor does have line item veto power in the budget, in reality, whatever gets sent over will become the enacted budget, because a simple majority vote in each chamber overrides all of the vetoes. So whatever we see get sent to the governor for action will become the enacted budget. The House version is very good to education. And even with that, they're still sitting on over $1 billion, I believe, that they were planning on using for tax relief of some sort. So we'll see what the Senate does. But I think that the high water mark will be what the House has recommended. I don't think we'll see the Senate go above and beyond what they've appropriated. So it's kind of where we are with the budget. Next slide, please. So we've seen a few bills already get enacted, meaning that they've gone to the governor for action and become law. So these were passed out very early in the session. So first we have House Bill 5. This is the West Kentucky Safe Fund. This was the tornado relief bill that they passed the first week. It includes $30 million for local school districts impacted by the tornadoes that flows through KDE. We have already put out an application for that money. So we are now waiting on districts that were impacted to send those back to us so that we can start to distribute those funds. Senate Bill 25 was a COVID bill. It provided some additional remote instruction days to districts on top of the 10 NTI days that they already receive. Next slide, please. And the last one is just a resolution that they passed out early on because the last few years they've really dialed back the governor's powers related to executive orders. So this just ensures that the executive orders related to the storms have the correct parameters on them. Next slide, please. So those are the three bills, or the three pieces of legislation that have gone to the governor for action already. There are a lot of bills that are starting to move. I suspect that by the time the filing deadlines hit for both chambers early first week of next month, we'll see somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 bills between the two chambers. So there's a lot of bills on this list, so I'll go fairly quickly, but I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has at some point. So House Bill 1 is the budget bill, as I mentioned. There were two CRT related bills that were filed early in the session in the House. Those are House Bill 14 and 18, although they have not moved. House Bill 33 it's been around for a couple of years now. We're really hoping to see this one get across the finish line. It's a school facilities bill that would just streamline things and make things more efficient. It is sitting over in the Senate Education Committee at this point, so we are really hopeful that that will get heard soon. House Bill 44 relates to mental health in district attendance policies. This is another one we would like to see move. It's also in Senate Education. Both those passed out of the House relatively quickly. House Bill 51, you may have heard earlier today, was voted on in committee. It got out of the House Education Committee this morning. It would prohibit facial coverings in a variety of settings, including public schools and public school transportation. House Bill 63 actually was getting a vote on the floor as I came on, so I didn't see the final vote, but I believe it just got out of the House. It does have a committee sub that made some amendments, so we'll see where this one goes in the Senate, but it would require a school resource officer by August 1st. Next slide, please. House Bill 126 is another bill that we are seeing come around for, I think, the third year. This is Chair Huff's FAFSA graduation requirement. It passed out of committee. It has a floor amendment now that would change this from a graduation requirement to just a recommendation. So districts would provide information on FAFSA to students and not make it a graduation requirement. House Bill 194 provides for an alternative pathway to a GED instead of a traditional diploma for students in alternative education programs. So this one passed out of the House and is over in the Senate. We'll see where it goes. I think that if that one moves, we're likely to see some committee subs on that one as well. House Bill 226, we have two early literacy bills. So in the House, it's House Bill 226. It passed out of the House with a committee sub and has been assigned to Senate A&R. That's because there is money appropriated for this. I believe it's $11 million that is in the House budget. And I believe that's why it's going through A&R, just in case you're wondering. House Bill 270 is a bit of kind of a national law. I believe that a similar law has passed in 37 other states. And this is another one that I think is coming around for the multiple time. It did pass out of committee. It does have a floor amendment that was added by the sponsor in the House. House Bill 277 would create a new alternative pathway. It would be option 9. So this one has gotten some conversations going around it. So we'll see. It's assigned to House Education. We'll see if it gets a vote in committee, but it's one that has popped up in conversations. There are two school choice bills this year. In the House, it's House Bill 305. The companion is SB 50. I just wanted to note that while it has not been assigned to committee yet, there are 20 co-sponsors in the House as of yesterday, including the Speaker. So we'll see if that one moves. Next slide, please. House Bill 384. I got a few questions from folks if there were any KTRS bills. This one is one of the few this year. It has not been assigned to committee yet. House Bill 5 was the tornado relief that they passed earlier in the session. We know that the impacted districts still have some items that they would like addressed this session. So House Bill 397 is kind of the first of those that we may see come later in the session. It would waive up to 15 student attendance days for impacted districts and consider those days as completed employment contract days for school personnel. It is currently awaiting a vote on the floor. House Bill 487 came out late last week, and you've probably seen the commissioner's response on social media. It is a CRT bill. It has not been assigned to committee yet. Interestingly, it has the same sponsor as House Bill 18. So, next slide, please. So over in the Senate, there's a lot less legislation that we're following, and mainly because the Senate's just over a third the size of the House. So just a lot less bills in general. So Senate Bill 1 got voted out on January 8th and has been sitting over in the House. I suspect that if it moves, it will move late in the session. But it would move principal selection and curricular decisions to the superintendents. SB 9, as I mentioned, is the other early literacy bill. So in the Senate committee, when they were hearing this, really the only concerns were about how this would impact potentially Read to Achieve, and I just wanted to highlight that there is no impact on Read to Achieve with either SB 9 or House Bill 226. And I forgot to mention with House Bill 226, the committee sub it picked up rolls House Bill 93 into it. So SB 50 is the other school choice bill. I just wanted to point out that while the House bill has 20 co-sponsors, there are no current co-sponsors on the Senate bill, just kind of highlighting some of the differences in the chambers. SB 60 is a Head Start bill that we have provided some language on. It picked up a committee sub and is passed out of the Senate and is now over in the House, but has not been assigned to committee. Next slide, please. House Bill or Senate Bill 61 would delete end of course examinations from the early high school graduation program. It's passed out of the Senate. We would like to see this one move over in the House, so we'll be watching that one. SB 102 is an interesting one in that it would require districts to report on school-based mental health services back to KDE. KDE would then be required to present that information to the Interim Joint Committee on Education. I don't know if that is kind of prepping them to do something to maybe potentially fund mental health services down the road, but that's out there. So, and then SB 138, I'm sure you all heard a little bit about last week. It's another CRT related bill that we have provided some additional feedback on. I suspect that it will get a hearing on Thursday in Senate Education and will likely have a committee sub attached that makes quite a few changes to the initial bill. And I believe that's all I have.
Thanks, Brian. Lots going on that we're keeping track of course, and we'll keep doing so through the rest of this legislative session. I think we've got Dr. White on to talk with us about the meaning of up to date on COVID-19 vaccinations. We all know that that's been a moving target as we have had some vaccines with 2 shots, some with 1, and then boosters, and then more boosters, and maybe more boosters on the horizon. So clear this up for us, Dr. White. Thanks for being on with us.
Yes, if I were all knowing, I would definitely clear it up for you. But I know what what recommendations that we get. So next slide, just to real quickly, just for those of you who don't watch the press conference, this is where we are right now with COVID in Kentucky. You'll be excited, as we all are, to see that those numbers going down with our Omicron surge. That is, even though we are down significantly, if you look at the numbers, this is still the 6th highest week of COVID cases we've had in the entire pandemic. So we are not in the clear yet, but it is very encouraging. Right now, as I looked just before the meeting, there are 4 orange counties, and we are expecting that to change. Yesterday in the press conference, Dr. Stack mentioned that if you look at our decrease that we're seeing and look at other states and how quickly their cases came down, looking to early to mid-March is when we're expecting to see orange and yellow counties and people being able to make some decisions at the local level as to what they are planning on doing as they continue to be cautious of COVID, but also to, if we can get our numbers down to where we were back in the summer, that would be glorious for everybody. Next slide, I just also wanted to give you an update of where we are with our testing. You've seen this slide before. So the red lines are the weeks starting back in actually the last week of July, first week of August. So the orange bar is the antigen testing, and the blue bars on top of that are the PCR testing. You can see where we started test to stay, how the numbers went up. Fall break, Thanksgiving break, and then our winter break. I'm very excited that we do have 106 private schools in Kentucky taking advantage of this program, along with 141 public school systems. So, and we still have schools onboarding. We still have schools contacting us saying, hey, can we still get involved with this? And absolutely you can. And we've tried to design this in such a way that you and the lab make an agreement on how you want this testing done, and then the lab supplies the materials, the personnel, they do the reporting to the state. So this takes that responsibility off of you as providers and allows the testing to be done in a manner that you want. Since that you can see on the slide, starting in the 1st of August, we have done in the state of Kentucky 845,500 tests since then. And so we're really very proud of the work that your teams have done to allow this to happen, and the safety that it's allowed your schools to work under. Okay, so the next slide is where it gets, I don't know that this next slide is going to make things any easier. It's a very complicated system, but I do think this helps us to see exactly what does up to date mean. And up to date is really not as complicated as it sounds if you know what the recommendations is. And I will tell you the reason I was so late getting this slide to Tony today was because the CDC updated this on Friday afternoon. So we had to update our slide as well. This is on the website, the link that we sent out in the Monday message. Anytime this is updated, that link will take you to the updated website and the updated recommendations. But I'd like to go to the next slide, Tony, because I think that makes it a little bit easier to see. So let's walk through this. Up to date means that whatever person you're dealing with has taken every recommended vaccine that is recommended at this particular point in time. So let's look at that first range. So pediatric, 5 to 11-year-olds. Let's say you've got an 8-year-old in your school and you want to know, is this 8-year-old up to date? Well, as of today, if you have an 8-year-old, to be up to date, they would need to have had both doses of the Pfizer vaccine, the primary series, to be up to date. Pfizer is the only vaccine at this time that is recommended for the 5 to 11-year-olds. So if I've got an 8-year-old in my class, they've had both doses of the primary series of Pfizer, they are up to date. If they've had one dose, that's great, but they're not up to date until they get their second one. Right now, there are no booster recommendations for the 5 to 8-year-olds, so that 8-year-old's up to date with the 2 doses in the primary series. Now let's look at a 15-year-old. 15-year-olds, that 12 to 17-year-old age group, again, Pfizer is all that's recommended at this time, and they would need to have to be up to date either the 2 doses of the primary series. That makes you up to date, unless it's been 5 months since you've done that. Then you need to have a booster. So if I'm 15 years old and I just finished my 2-dose series 4 months ago, I am up to date. But when 5 months rolls around, then I'm due my booster. I would need that booster to be up to date to all the current CDC recommendations. The next age group we'll look at are the adults, 18 and over. They can either get Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson. To be up to date in the over 18-year-old age group, you need to have your primary series, either your 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna, or your 1 dose of J&J. The primary series. Once you get that, you're up to date, unless enough time has passed that you're due a booster. And so on here it shows that the booster will happen in 5 months after the after the Pfizer Moderna, or 2 months after the Johnson & Johnson. So to be up to date, it's very fluid as we learn more. And we've talked in the past about how if you have a financial advisor that tells you to buy a stock today, and 3 months from now they tell you to buy a different stock, or even a week from now they tell you to buy a different stock and sell that old stock, instead of saying, why do you keep changing your mind, you're going to say, thank you for that new update. Thank you for that new information. We want the latest information when we invest in the stock market. We also want the latest information when we invest in our health. So that's those top 3 areas, the pediatric, the adolescent, and the adults, is pretty clear cut right now, unless new data changes. It gets a bit more complicated in that box below, and I'm not going to go into great detail about that, other than to say if people have a medical condition that keeps them from responding to the vaccination robustly. For example, if you're a cancer patient and you're on chemo, you've had an organ transplant and you're on immunosuppressive drugs, or you take an immunosuppressive drug for a whole host of other medical conditions, you need an extra dose to bring you up to everybody else out there who doesn't have an immunosuppressed condition. So this little guide here and the table I showed you before lets you know how that particular person may need extra doses. People with rheumatoid arthritis, they get their 2 primary doses, but they really need that 3rd dose to get them up to a level with their peers, and then they need to have a booster just as the other 18 and ups do. I had it asked at the Superintendent's Advisory Council, are we going to get more boosters? And my answer is probably, but I don't know that. You can be assured that there are countries around the world that are months ahead of us as far as their vaccination levels that are looking at this very question. We know that when you get a vaccine, you develop a large number of antibodies, and how long those antibodies stay high in your system, high enough to protect you, that's something that we don't know until we actually watch people's reactions and responses over time. I know in some countries they're looking at maybe giving another booster to people over 65 because our immune system isn't as robust as a 40-year-old's. Do the immunocompromised people need another booster? Those questions are still being looked at. Denmark is also doing a lot of work with this. England is doing a lot of work with this. So there are lots and lots of people out there saying, okay, we're all here right now. What's going to happen down the road, and what do we need to do to try to help keep our clients in our country safe? I want to be sure that I echo from listening to this meeting so far what gratitude that I have personally as a Kentuckian and as the Department for Public Health for all the work that you all have done to keep your kids safe. I see the picture of the superintendent driving the bus. I know you have done multiple over and above things. I know your staff has multitasked in all different areas in order to keep your schools open. As we all agree, keeping kids in school is our goal for that person. That face-to-face learning is so important. So I just wanted to make sure that I come and I tell you all these things, but I just wanted to stop and take a breath and thank you for the work that you've done. I looked in the Google, unless I looked at it wrong, I didn't see questions, but I am looking forward to listening to the DEI presentation next, and I will be around at the end of the afternoon whenever Dr. Glass is ready for questions.
Thanks, Dr. White. Excellent as always. And now we will turn things over to Dr. Woods Tucker and Dr. Sweeney to talk about our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner Glass. Appreciate it. Everyone who's joining us, thank you, especially our outstanding superintendents who are working hard every day to keep our students, staff, community members safe so that we can have students for in-person learning. So again, big thank you on behalf of Commissioner Glass and the Kentucky Board of Education for what you do each day. We're lucky to have Dr. Sweeney. I don't know if you all know this, but Dr. Sweeney is new in a new role, I should say. He's our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So we're happy to have him. And of course, he still wears his hat in part with the Comprehensive Counseling Program. So Dr. Sweeney, thanks for joining me today.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, our learning target today is to introduce Kentucky superintendents, and for some of you to reintroduce Kentucky superintendents to KDE's new Equity Toolkit and Equity Dashboard. We only have a few minutes to do this today, so we're going to try to be as thorough as we can. And if you want to join us next month, Damian and I will do a more thorough presentation, so please feel free to join us at the next Kentucky Board of Education meeting in March. So quickly, we start out in terms of looking at Kentucky's Equity Toolkit. We look at what our very own Mickey Ray discussed earlier. As you know, Mickey is our new Chief Academic Officer, and she serves with me in the Office of Teaching and Learning. So at the very foundation of equity resides our high quality academic standards that are available to all students and our staff that really says or shows to our community what students should know and be able to do. And so we're happy to have that. We're also happy to be part of the pilot program that Mickey talked about earlier regarding high quality instructional resources and materials. So a big shout out to those districts and schools that are taking part in that program. And we hope that even after the funding through CCSSO is up, that more districts and more schools really take a closer look at the use of high quality instructional resources and materials. The research is quite compelling. Even our novice teachers who are engaged and have a deep understanding of instructional resources and materials, along with the standards, they're able to help their students realize tremendous growth. So again, a big thank you to our school districts and schools that are participating in that program. Also, many of you have had an introduction to our first of the A4 modules. And so we're excited about that. It's really 4 modules that really help us, all of us, explore our thinking, our underpinnings behind decisions that we have. And so that module is out there, and we're working closely with our education co-op, our 8 co-ops, to deliver that training to your districts, that professional development to your district. Right in the center is the Equity Dashboard. We'll introduce that very shortly, and I'll ask Dr. Sweeney to jump in and make a few comments regarding the dashboard. The playbook, you all have heard me talk about the playbook for the last year and a half. We're in the final stages right now of selecting a vendor, and it will be a really crowning moment for us because we'll look at the data from the Equity Dashboard. And folks, we're really fortunate here in Kentucky to have a universal SIS system, a universal student information system. And that's something when I began to, as a superintendent, and also began to look at working at the state level, I saw that there was a discongruent issue when we didn't operate with the same information system. So we're fortunate here to have the same information system called Infinite Campus, and it allows us to look at data in real time. And I think you're going to be impressed. So I want to steal any of Dr. Sweeney's thunder when he talks about that here briefly. Then the next part of this puzzle, and if you all look closely, you can see this puzzle has grown a little bit since the last year and a half, and we're happy that the puzzle has grown actually. That big piece there is the diversity, equity, and inclusion professional learning communities. We have professional learning communities here at KDE. We meet monthly. We meet with, some of you have diversity, equity, and inclusion folks that you've had hired in your district for years. And so we've created this beautiful professional learning community where Dr. Sweeney heads up this meeting, and I jump in with these folks, and we talk about some of the DEI efforts that are happening in your district, some of the celebrations, as well as some of the challenges. So it is morphed into a beautiful learning community. Then we also have a professional learning community within our education co-ops. As you know, we were fortunate to hire eight different coordinators for DEI with our core co-ops to work directly with you. And also we have one position here in the Kentucky Department of Education. Then also you've heard quite a bit about the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching, and those 10 districts who really are working hard with your Grow Your Own programs in terms of expanding not only the diversity of our teacher workforce here in Kentucky, but also looking at building more opportunities and sustainability amongst your ranks. So we're really excited about them, and really I'm looking forward to talking more about that later on. But what really makes this work, and you heard Mickey mention this as well, is our multi-tiered system of support. Jan Sellers has done a tremendous job in helping us with that and ensuring that we have, thinking about students first, and that we're looking at the whole child, if you will, because it's very important that we continue to support the whole child and meeting students where they are. So let's move on to the next slide.
All right, so at this point, we want to talk to you about the equity dashboard, and you've already heard from him, but you're going to see a video with Dr. Wiz Tucker. So check this out.
Hello, I'm Dr. Thomas Woods Tucker, Deputy Commissioner and Chief Equity Officer at the Kentucky Department of Education. I'm extremely proud to introduce you to the Equity Dashboard suite of visualizations, a tool created to support schools and districts as they consider data points through an equity lens. This dashboard will help teams identify groups of students who are at risk of being over or even underrepresented in different areas like chronic absenteeism and advanced coursework using an easy to understand color-coded system. The dashboard is designed to offer a big picture look that will help schools and districts identify areas needing further attention. KDE defines equity as the promotion of access, opportunity, and advancement of all individuals, including those in underserved communities, in order to identify and eliminate conditions that prevent the ability of all students to reach their full potential. Assessing school and district equity is about more than just identifying challenges and offering recommendations. It is also about creating an intentional, ambitious, and urgent path forward for Kentucky districts to improve outcomes for all students. When we say all students, it is with the understanding that each student comes to the district with unique and valid needs for learning, that there are students in often marginalized groups that require our attention and intervention in ways that address specific opportunity gaps, and that the ways in which we seek equity for one student improves our ability to sustain equity for all students. Equity provides for students to be seen and to see themselves and their lived experiences in the learning environment, inclusive of gender, race, ethnicity, gender identity, and ability. The remainder of this video will orient you to the equity dashboard so that your team can begin utilizing this powerful tool to identify areas of inequity and problem solve how to ensure all students reach their full potential. I'm very excited to see what we can accomplish together as we walk this path towards equity.
All right. So we like to laugh with Dr. Wiz Tucker. It only took him one take on that video. All right,
Damien,
so let's jump
Damien,
into.
Yeah, I was pretty clean that day too. I think I was pretty clean that day too.
You were. So with the equity dashboard, again, we're using risk ratios to calculate everything that we do. And with those risk ratios, that's going to compare the likelihood of an event occurring for one group to the likelihood of the same event occurring for all other students. And so if we see disproportionality in the likelihoods of the two groups, a group may be considered at risk of an event occurring or not occurring. And risk ratios are shown inside of circles that are color-coded blue if the group is not at risk, and orange if the group is at risk. So take a look at an example. One of the beautiful things about our new equity dashboard, is that it is in real time and it is live data, right? So if you check out this tool right now, you're seeing data as of February 15th, 2022. All right, so again, with our equity dashboard, you'll see these blue dots which suggest that students are not at risk, but orange dots that suggest that students are. What's cool is that you can hover over different dots to get more information. So with this one, we hovered over and we saw that Black students are 3.35 times as likely to be receiving out-of-school suspension as non-Black students. In terms of in-school suspensions, Black students are 2.74 times as likely to receive in-school suspension as non-Black students here in Kentucky. And then in terms of academic proficiency, you'll start to see trends here as well, right? If you take a look at those orange dots, we'll see that many of our minority populations are considered at risk as it pertains to reading, English, science, and mathematics proficiency. So we offer tools with our equity dashboard that can really guide you and your team to making data-based, team-based decisions. We offer the 4-step problem-solving process, and it's going to really help guide those team-based decisions. It'll ask you different questions. It'll ask you about the sources that you use to answer those questions, and as you document the ways that you're answering them, it'll help you also determine root causes. As we look at these root causes, we'll be able to figure out what are some deeper things that we need to explore in order to solve some of these inequities. Now, while the equity dashboard is quantitative, we also know that context matters. So it is important to note that while the Kentucky Department of Education's equity dashboard should be extremely helpful to educators, context matters, and this is not the only data that district and school leaders should consider. We have been reading this book called Street Data, which is incredible. Street data emerges from human interaction, taking us down to the ground level to see, hear, and engage with the children and adults in our school communities, particularly those at the margins. Honoring, valuing, and lifting up the voices of your students and their families can offer you a great deal of information about how school and the educational process are going for your community. So this was a very, very brief introduction to the equity dashboard, but we highly encourage you and your teams to explore this tool. Again, it's in the Tableau suite of visualizations with Infinite Campus. Thank you for the opportunity to present. You can reach Dr. Wiz Tucker and myself through email. You can also follow us on Twitter for other updates.
Thank you, Dr. Sweeney. We appreciate it. Back over to Tony.
Okay, everyone, I think that concludes our program presentation for today. Tony, I didn't see any questions in the Google form. Have we had any that came in during the diversity, equity, and inclusion presentation?
No, surprisingly, everybody has just been very quiet today. We do have several people, couple people, 100 people, couple hundred people logged on, but no questions today. So I think we can give everybody the benefit of having about an hour back of their time. Damien, if you can just move to the slide about the next dates. I did want to just let everybody know that we do have a huddle that will be taking place next week. These are with our tornado impacted superintendents. It's the 23rd from 1:30 to 2. And of course, all of our superintendents are invited to attend this, as they have. This is, I believe, our 6th huddle. And so we will be providing some additional details or just support there. So that should already be on your calendar. And then our next superintendent's webcast will be back to the 2nd Tuesday of the month. I know many of you all were texting or emailing me last week. We will be back to the 2nd Tuesday of the month. We had to move it this month because of the Kentucky Board of Education meeting. So we appreciate your flexibility with indulging us this month. So I guess we can just go ahead and say we'll see you next month. Commissioner.
Okay. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.